watching All 24 News World News Program. Next up are the headlines. Gaza officials say a new occupation raid on Rafah has caused deaths and injuries, and that the Israeli occupation has broken the truce about 1,250 times. Also coming up, Trump says killings in Iran have stopped. The latter denies protester execution plans. Turkey joins China and Russia in opposing military action against Iran. In Sudan, the army repels major attack in Kordofan as the World Food Programme warns the country's hunger crisis remains the largest in the world. And after White House talks, Denmark says the US still wants to acquire the island, while Germany says NATO won't allow the Arctic militarization. Welcome back. Several Palestinians were killed and others injured in a fire and airstrikes by the Zionist occupation across the Gaza Strip since dawn. Medical sources say the death toll has risen to 8 so far. 5 members of one family were killed when a home west of Deir al-Balah in central Gaza was targeted. 3 more Palestinians were killed by occupation fire at the Alam intersection in Rafah in the south. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff's announcement of his second phase to end the war in Gaza is being met with cautious hope and a demand for action. Displaced families in Gaza say any plan must bring concrete changes. A full Israeli withdrawal, open crossings, and an immediate end to attacks on civilians. They are calling for accelerated aid deliveries to relieve the dire humanitarian crisis now.
What second phase or first phase they are talking about? They haven't even started the first phase yet. How can they start with the second? They've been bombing since this morning. They targeted Tufah and Zaytun neighborhoods. Houses are coming down. Which second phase? We don't want ink on paper. We want real action on the ground. We don't want it to be like every other time, just words on paper. And then things stay the same or even get worse.
Gaza's Technocratic Committee says rebuilding the Strip will take at least 7 years, calling reconstruction a humanitarian priority to restore housing, food, healthcare, and education. Committee head Ali Shat says early shelter centers will be built as debris removal begins. A World Bank-supported plan will move in stages, starting with emergency relief, followed by recovery, then full reconstruction and development.
I will start first with the infrastructure, after addressing the human being, protecting people and providing appropriate shelter and decent living conditions, including food, water, healthcare, and proper education, placing them in environments that preserve dignity. These places may take the form of prefabricated buildings. What I mean is a dignified life. That is why the focus has always been on early shelter and the establishment of early shelter centers. These centers in the Strip have been identified on maps. We have allocated areas, and these maps will be implemented so that early shelter is carried out in parallel with the removal of rubble.
Gaza's government media office says 1,244 serious violations have been documented since the ceasefire took effect, condemning the Israeli occupation of breaching international law and undermining the agreement. The office reports shootings at civilians, military incursions into residential areas, shelling, and the destruction of homes and institutions. It warns that Gaza remains under a slow-motion genocide as the occupation continues to evade its obligations, including allowing humanitarian aid to enter. The U.S. President's envoy announcing a move to Phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire has brought renewed focus on violations during the Phase 1. Gaza's government media office says the Zionist occupation committed 1,244 violations, killing 449 Palestinians and blocking the entry of aid, tents and medicines. Nabil Khazini has more.
Gaza is witnessing the end of the first phase of the ceasefire agreement with a grim toll of 1,244 violations recorded, resulting in 349 deaths and 1,246 injuries. Despite the ceasefire, the Zionist occupation continued their attacks, targeting women and children and preventing families from recovering their loved ones' bodies from the rubble. But it's not just the bullets that kill in Gaza. The tight Zionist blockade has become another form of violence, imposing hunger, deprivation, human suffering and death. Babies froze to death in flimsy tents amid the ruins, as harsh weather conditions are hitting the strip. This came as humanitarian aid barely tricked through the crossings controlled by the Zionist occupation. Only 24,611 trucks carrying aid entered Gaza, far below the promised 57,000. Fuel deliveries fell drastically short, with only 600 trucks allowed in out of nearly 4,750 needed. Hospitals, bakeries, as well as water and sewage systems are facing near total shutdown. As the second phase of the ceasefire begins, experts warn it may mirror the first one, marked by continued Zionist violations and harsh conditions that exacerbate the suffering of innocent Palestinians.
US President Donald Trump says he has been told that killings during protests in Iran have been slowed and that there is no current plan for mass executions. Speaking at the White House, Trump did not rule out U.S. military action, saying Washington is monitoring developments, while noting the administration received what he described as a very positive report there.
We've been told that the killing in Iran is stopping, and it's stopped, and it's stopping. And there's no plan for executions or executions. So I've been told that on good authority. We'll find out about it. I'm sure if it happens, we'll all be very upset, including you will be very upset, but that's just gotten to me, some information that the killing has stopped, that the executions have stopped. They're not going to have an execution, which a lot of people were talking about for the last couple of days. Today was going to be the day of execution.
For his part, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi says no executions by hanging will take place either today or tomorrow. Speaking to Fox News, Araghchi said 10 days of peaceful protests over economic hardship were followed by 3 days of violence he blamed on the Zionist entity, adding that calm has been now restored.
Terrorist cells.
Now Iran has proven that it is ready for negotiation and diplomacy. We have demonstrated this over the past 20 years, in 2015, in 2025, and every time. But it is the United States that has always avoided diplomacy, cutting it off, and choosing war. My message is clear. Between war and diplomacy, diplomacy is the better path, even though we have no positive experience with the United States. Nevertheless, diplomacy is far preferable to war. However, the decision ultimately rests with the U.S. president.
Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry says it remains open to dialogue or diplomacy despite decades of what it calls failed engagement with the United States. In a statement to Fox News, a senior official emphasized that negotiation is always preferable to war. He accused Washington of consistently abandoning diplomacy in favor of military action.
There were terrorist cells.
So, as a result, we have been fighting against terrorists and not against protesters. It was a completely different story. What I have to explain, and this is important, why they started to shoot at people. For one reason, they wanted to increase the number of deaths. Why? Because President Trump said that if there are killings, he would intervene, and they wanted to drag him into this conflict. And that was exactly an Israeli plot. No, I haven't heard about that. And there is no hanging, not today and not tomorrow. I can tell you, and I'm confident about that, there is no plan for hanging at all.
The UN Security Council is meeting to hear a briefing on developments in Iran. The session announced by the Somali presidency of the Council was requested by the United States. Iraq is drawing a hard line. Following U.S. threats against Iran, a military spokesman stated Thursday that Iraq will not allow its territory to be used to launch attacks on any country. The statement calls for restraint and dialogue, warning that use in Iraqi land, airspace, or waters for strikes would violate its core principles amid a volatile regional escalation. Turkey states its position on the matter. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said on Thursday that Ankara opposes any foreign military operation in Iran. Fidan emphasized that Iran should resolve its own issues, describing recent protests not as an uprising against the government, but as demonstrations linked to the country's economic crisis.
We are against military intervention in Iran. Iran needs to resolve its own internal problems itself. We have told Iran this as well. They need to resolve their problems with countries in the region. Global nuclear issues must also be resolved through diplomacy without delay in order to eliminate structural problems causing economic difficulties.
Switching focus to Sudan, the Sudanese army says it has repelled a major attack by the Rapid Support Forces on the city of Al Ubaid. Army sources say its 5th Infantry Division shot down 2 RSF drones during fighting in North Kordofan state. They also report capturing a large number of the paramilitary group's vehicles. Sudan's Transitional Sovereign Council says efforts to unify support behind the armed forces are moving forward to reclaim the country. Council member Ibrahim Jabri Ibrahim told a press conference that the military will coordinate with special forces to restore control and secure a stable, safe life for Sudanese citizens.
To coordinate with the leadership and the commander-in-chief to boost everything that could enhance this young unity and be absolutely certain that the Sudanese people are destined for victory and will triumph. And Sudan will be liberated, and the special forces will play a major role in liberating this big and great country.
The UN World Food Programme warns that Sudan faces the world's largest hunger crisis, with conflict driving needs higher. The WFP says without urgent funding, food supplies will run out, leaving millions at risk. Currently, the agency reaches nearly 1.8 million people each month in famine-affected or high-risk areas. Back home, Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune met Thursday with Farah Sheikh Abdulqadir Mohammed, Somalia's Special Envoy and Minister of Education, along with his delegation, the Algerian presidency said. The meeting was also attended by head of the Presidential Cabinet, Boualem Boualem, Presidential Diplomatic Advisor Ammar Habba, and Minister of National Education, Mohammed Sghir Saadawi. After the meeting, Somalia's Special Envoy said President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud's message to President Tebboune praised Algeria's role in supporting African and Arab causes, including Somalia's sovereignty and unity.
Today, I met with His Excellency, the President of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria, President Abdelmadjid Tebboune. May Allah protect him and preserve him. And I handed him a written message from His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Somalia, Dr. Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, in which he expressed utmost thanks and appreciation for Algeria's leading role in supporting just African and Arab causes, and affirmed the Republic of Somalia's gratitude for Algeria's steadfast support for the unity and sovereignty of Somalia.
Somalia's presidential envoy said President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud's message to President Tebboune also outlined Somalia's stance on regional policies, highlighting UAE actions that undermine Somali unity.
كما أوضحت الرسالة موقف الصومال الواضح
The message also clarified Somalia's position regarding certain regional policies and interferences, foremost among which are the practices of the United Arab Emirates that contribute to undermining Somalia's unity and fueling separatist conflicts, thus posing a direct threat to peace, stability and unity in both the African and Arab spheres alike.
Somalia's special envoy said President Abdelmajid Tebboune reaffirmed Algeria's strong support for Somalia, pledging full backing for its unity, sovereignty and territorial integrity.
ومن جانبه جدد فخامة الرئيس عبد المجيد تبون تأكيد.
For his part, His Excellency President Abdelmajid Tebboune reaffirmed his country's unwavering support for the Republic of Somalia and its steadfast commitment to standing by Somalia in defending its unity, sovereignty and territorial integrity, rejecting the so-called cessation and the recognition of these territories by the occupying authorities, and supporting Somalia's efforts to promote security and stability in Africa and the Arab world.
Somalia's special envoy said the meeting with President Abdelmajid Tebboune follows up on the outcomes and agreements from President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud's earlier visit to Algeria.
ويأتي هذا اللقاء في إطار متابعة مخرجات الزيارة الرئاسية السابقة لفخامة.
This meeting comes as a follow-up to the outcomes of the previous presidential visit of His Excellency President Sheikh Hassan Mohamud to Algeria and the ensuing understandings, agreements and political accords affirming the depth of the fraternal relations between the two brotherly countries and their shared commitment to strengthening coordination and continuous consultation. Both sides stress the importance of unifying African and Arab positions and enhancing joint coordination with regional and international frameworks to confront current challenges and reject any external interference that affects the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states.
Still with Algeria's related news, Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense and Chief of Staff of the People's National Army General Said Chengriha observed Thursday the successful launch of the observation satellite Alsat-3A from China's Xiongchuan Satellite Launch Center. The Ministry of National Defense said the 5:01 a.m. operation strengthens Algeria's space observation capabilities, part of a partnership with the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation. The satellite will provide high-precision data for monitoring geospatial intelligence and mapping, including digital elevation models. Algerian experts contributed to the satellite launch, marking a key boost to the country's geospatial capabilities and reflecting Algeria's ongoing push to advance its space technology. Hassan Burkan reports now.
The successful launch of an Algerian satellite dedicated to monitoring and strengthening national space capabilities marks a new milestone for Algeria's space program. The satellite lifted off from the Jiuquan platform in northwest China. The launch forms part of Algeria's Remote Sensing Satellite Systems Program, a joint initiative between the Algerian Space Agency and the China Great Wall Industry Corporation. Under the agreement signed in 2023, the partnership covers the development and launch of 2 Earth observation satellites, the establishment of ground systems, and the provision of training and related remote sensing services. Key advantages of the high-resolution Alsat-3 satellite include strengthening Algeria's Earth observation capabilities, mapping and producing high-resolution imagery for urban planning, monitoring agriculture crops, and estimating production capacity, water resource management, monitoring and managing wildfires, floods, and desertification for rapid response. The satellite provides highly detailed information about the Earth's surface and delivers important sovereign data for Algeria. It also supports the Algerian economy. Alsat-3 will significantly enhance Algeria's access to critical data through its high-resolution monitoring capabilities, while strengthening the national geospatial intelligence and geospatial information system with high added value, including cartography and digital elevation models. This will grant Algeria greater control over advanced high-precision technologies and ensure the availability of sovereign data for the Algerian state.
Moving on to a different matter, Algeria has called on the UN General Assembly to step up and address mounting global crises. At a session on the body's 2026 priorities, Algeria's deputy envoy Toufiq al-Koudri stated the UN faces serious political and financial challenges. He reiterated Algeria's position that the General Assembly must fully assume its responsibilities.
Interesting. Affirms that the UN is needed.
Our organization is facing serious political and financial challenges, and Algeria once again stresses that the need for the United Nations has become more urgent than ever. To address these challenges, we must renew our sincere commitment to the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter. The core of our collective success lies in the effective implementation of the reforms under the United Nations 18th Session Initiative, which must constitute genuine efforts to make the organization stronger, more inclusive, and more effective. In this regard, Algeria underscores the necessity for the General Assembly to fully assume its responsibilities.
Meanwhile, Algeria's UN mission says the country will continue to push for Security Council reform to address the historical injustice suffered by Africa.
Algeria will continue to firmly advocate for reform of the Security Council in order to correct the historical injustice suffered by the African continent and to ensure fair and permanent representation for Africa in the maintenance of international peace and security. With regard to the future leadership of the organization, Algeria supports a transparent process for the selection of the next Secretary General, one that reflects the collective will of all member states. In the field of international peace and security, we call for respect for principles and purposes of the UN Charter. This commitment remains our guiding principle, particularly with regard to peacekeeping efforts in various regions of the world. In the area of development, Algeria's priorities for 2026 are designed to support the effective implementation of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda.
Moving on to another topical development. Denmark says U.S. President Donald Trump remains committed to annexing Greenland. After a White House meeting with Danish and Greenlandic officials, Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen called the plan an unacceptable breach of Greenland's sovereignty.
Well, we're going to see what happens with Greenland. We need Greenland for national security, so we're going to see what happens. They're going to brief me on the meeting right after this conference. In fact, the sooner I get you out, the faster I'm going to know exactly what happened. But we have a very good relationship with Denmark, as you know. We'll see. But, we're doing the Golden Dome. We're doing a lot of things, and we really need it. If we don't go in, Russia's going to go in, and China's going to go in. And there's not a thing that Denmark can do about it, but we can do everything about it. And the problem is, there's not a thing that Denmark can do about it if Russia or China wants to occupy Greenland. But there's everything we can do. You found that out last week with Venezuela. There's everything we can do about things such as that. Not going to happen. We're not, I can't rely on Denmark being able to fend themselves off. They were talking about they put an extra dog, and they were serious about this. They put an extra dog sled there.
Greenland's foreign ministry says Nuuk will not compromise on its sovereignty as a self-governing territory within Denmark. Foreign Minister Vivian Mutzfeld told a press conference that Wednesday's White House meeting with Danish officials, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio focused on defining sovereignty, boundaries, and de-escalating tensions while seeking a constructive path forward. U.S. President Donald Trump said the United States needs Greenland, expressing doubts about Denmark's ability to protect the island. Speaking in the Oval Office, he added that Greenland is crucial for the United States' national security, as well as for Denmark's. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius says NATO will not allow Russia or China to militarize the Arctic. Speaking Thursday, Pistorius stressed the need for EU-NATO coordination on the Danish-led reconnaissance mission in Greenland, following Germany's decision to join European partners in sending troops. Moving on to a different matter, U.S. President Donald Trump says Russia is ready to reach a settlement in Ukraine, while Ukrainian President Zelensky is less willing. In an exclusive interview with Reuters Wednesday, Trump said Russian President Vladimir Putin is open to ending the war, blaming Kiev for stalling of U.S.-led peace efforts. Russian President Vladimir Putin says the Ukrainian crisis stems from ignoring Russia's legitimate interests. Speaking Thursday in Moscow while receiving foreign ambassadors, Putin said Russia will pursue its goals until Kiev shows willingness to settle. He called for a swift, peaceful resolution and expects Kiev and its allies to acknowledge the need for lasting peace. Hundreds of farmers in Toulouse protested the Mercosur agreement, saying it allows cheaper imports that bypass EU environmental and health standards. They warned the deal threatens French agriculture and incomes, criticizing authorities for refusing dialogue amid a heavy security presence. The 21st edition of the international competition for the Algiers Prize for Recitation and Memorization of the Holy Quran concluded on Thursday at the Grand Mosque of Algiers, with the participation of more than 50 countries. The closing ceremony was presided over by Algerian Prime Minister Sifiriyeb on behalf of President Abdelmajid Tebboune, and was attended by several members of the government. The ceremony was also attended by representatives of several national bodies and members of the diplomatic corps accredited to Algeria, as well as scholars and sheikhs from Algeria and various Islamic countries. The Minister of Mujahideen and Right Holders held on Thursday the 30th edition of the November 1st, 1954 prize ceremony at the National Army Club. In his opening remarks, the Minister emphasized that this national event embodies a moment where national memory intertwines with the bridges to the future. He noted that the November 1st prize, throughout its long history, has become a leading national competition that highlights creativity and rigorous research into Algerian history.
لقد أضحت جائزة أول نوفمبر 1954.
The November 1st, 1954 prize has throughout its long history become a nationally recognized competition where young people interested in commemorating the achievements of the glorious revolution compete alongside researchers and specialists in national history across various fields and genres of literary creativity, from rigorous historical research to audiovisual works with a historical dimension.
And that wraps up our news program for tonight. To catch up on any part you missed or get the latest updates, you can always visit our social media platforms as well as our website. On behalf of All 24 News team, I'm Slim Sid, signing off. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.